they were doing this, and in the meantime, the family's like, no, we don't want this, because in their culture, having club feet was actually really honoring, because they had a god who had club feet, and so it was just kind of, it was very honoring to him, and so they didn't actually want the surgeries to fix that, but since the helper wasn't on the same, like, didn't communicate that, he didn't know that, and so he was fighting for something that they really didn't want. And so I'm going to conclude with some questions, and I have some M&Ms, so yeah, get a can for it.
We'll try the video one more.
It's too bad because it's actually really fun. Oh.
Okay, well, I'll make it. It's gonna be frozen.
Okay. And so my question for you guys, and more than one person can answer, can you think of a time that when you were stereotyped, and how did that make you feel? Did you like it, or did it upset you? And then I also have
Okay, this just happened recently, and I wasn't stereotyped by my looks or anything, it was by my name. So I took Sean to the hospital, right, because he needed a family member or whatever, and his family wasn't in town. So I drove him down to the hospital, and they only allowed one person back in the recovery room. And he said once he got out of surgery, they asked him, they're like, hey, who's your family member or whatever? And he was like, oh, it's my friend Roberto Gallegos. And he said that the nurse asked him if I knew English after he told her his name. So that was messed up, and I was upset. Why would you take somebody who doesn't know English to a hospital?
And so, does anyone else have any experiences? Being stereotyped that they would like to share? I'm in.
Well, yesterday, one of my friends commented something that I wasn't agree with, because I was supporting peace and all that in Venezuela because of what is going on. And I didn't take any part for any position, I didn't take position in the conflict. So she said, or she saw that what I was trying to do was hide some facts, and she told me I was just a real communist, an evil communist, so it was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Yeah.
I can remember in high school, I remember back in yesterday, I was having a discussion, like some of my friends having a discussion, and we were just talking about houses that we lived in. And I had said, well, I live in an Indian house, and what my family and like people who live down my street, we know that because my tribe, Choctaw Nation, like builds those houses. So it's like, well, I live in an Indian house for the Choctaw Nation, and she was a white girl, and she said, "Do you live in a teepee?" And I just looked at her, and I just like kept looking at her, and I said, "Are you serious? You have like a teepee?" And I just turned around and walked away.
I actually, when I went to, for soccer, I went to this region 4 camp, but it was a bunch of different states gathered together, and you had to like try out and make a team, but they asked where I'm from, and I was like, I'm from Wyoming, and they're like, oh, so you ride buffaloes to school? I'm like, no, you don't ride buffaloes to school. Anyways, that was kind of a stereotype of rugged Wyoming. And so then another question I have is, can anyone think of a time where they made their culture the standard and not necessarily judged, but like kind of questioned them because they did something differently than your culture did? Like, for example, when I gave the drinking example.
I think I had one. Like in elementary school, my mom used to make my lunch, and you'd always get a peanut butter sandwich, chips, and like cookie, and that was like what I thought everyone ate for lunch. Well, then I had one of my best friends was Ethiopian, and for lunch she would bring like she wouldn't bring like a sandwich, she would bring like a full like meal where she had to bring like Tupperware and warm it up, and I just thought like that was so weird, like why are you doing that? But that's like that was what she did. Like she had, it was like leftovers from the night before, because they make like huge meals, and it was like food that I've never heard of before. So
Yeah. I think that we even do that, even like you said, but even like in classes, like our social classes, we forget that people, even when they live in America, that they live a different lifestyle than us. But can you guys? Does anyone else have a story? My last question is, have you ever felt discriminated against or felt bad, so after like hearing about stereotypes and, did any of you guys like feel like kind of bad for maybe like with the myths and stuff with gays, like, just kind of maybe like thought about that and like felt bad about that? Kind of maybe changed your views a little bit? Or maybe encourage people?
I knew somebody who, well, this is kind of he was from Texas, and he grew up where his dad was a pastor and like a cowboy church. I think I've shared this before, but I didn't know it until like getting to know him a little bit better, like as friends. But as time went on, because he knew my family, he was like a year older than me, and he lived in Texas. And like I don't know about now, but he was really, really racist. And like it was really weird because growing up, I barely hung out with the white kids, so like in Chicago, and like like I loved everyone, and like it was just so weird to like. He asked me if I've ever dated a black guy, and I said, yeah, like, what's the big deal? And he was like, I didn't know that. Like, I usually don't make friends with people who, like, associate with. And I was like, what? Like,
Yeah.
what era are you from? Like, why do you do that? Like, why do you have that view? And he was like, he didn't want to tell me, but he was really angry at me. And he like told me something about his sister. So I guess like some weird thing happened with his sister, but he like stereotyped everyone after that. It was really hard. And I tried to like talk with him and like be like, it's not like that. Like that one person you just judge like just because of either culturally or like their skin color or whatever, like
Yeah.
it was really messed up. And so like, I don't know, it was really hard to change his view, but I don't know. That was really sad. I don't talk with him anymore.
I do think that's hard. Like, I feel like even, like, we get mad when someone's like, oh, you're predictable. You're like, no, I'm not. Like, when people, like, start, like putting this box around you, it gets really offensive. And so, again, like, I just want to challenge you to remember, like, in Malachi and the Psalms, and to remember that, I mean, God did create us, and we were fearfully and wonderfully made, and not only were other people fearfully and wonderfully made, but you were as well. And so I just challenge you to go out with that mindset when you start talking and interacting with people. And then, are you gonna?
And then attached in your packets, there is a homework assignment. Basically, since it's important to know, like in order to be in more diverse groups, it's important to know your stereotypes and how to deal with them. So there's an exercise that, helps you figure out some of your stereotypes. And that to go along with this, Dr. Amen kind of presents a pretty good exercise in dealing with your negative thoughts, just to write out some of your negative stereotypes, or even positive stereotypes into why you have them, and then analyze them and just see if they're actually true and valid. Or, beyond that, get to know somebody before you even put them in that stereotype. So that'd be your homework. And then before we leave, since we talked about stereotypes and discrimination, it's such a heavy topic and it's kind of depressing. So let's do some appreciation. Just tell the person next to you, why you're thankful for them or something you appreciate about them.
Appreciate the number. Speaking up and sharing.
Appreciate it for all the.
What?
I appreciate it.
We kind of like set, and it's kind of, you're not gonna put it right.
You're,
You know what I'm saying, but like, and I was just saying, we kind of said.
Everybody give an appreciation.
If it was actually happening, there's no way.
So before we leave, are there any questions that anybody has?
I'd be pushing everybody out of the
I
way.
didn't even see, and I forgot to put it in here.
Does anybody have any questions that we can answer or anything before we leave? Because, you forget by Wednesday, so. If not, you guys are free to go.
If you guys want some more M&Ms, you can have some. Over there.
Oh, right here.
All right. Should give them a hand, I guess. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Both of them are.